Moving now to La Liga, starting with, I'm just calling it the title race. Really, it's the Real Madrid Barcelona storyline. Can Real Madrid keep pace with Barcelona? Can Barcelona replicate their pace from last season? Didn't start great in their opener. Does Real Madrid just become the best team in this league? Can Atletico Madrid, who had a sort of strange season where it looked like everything was falling apart and then they were phenomenal for a while, can they get into that conversation? Because they were right there with Real Madrid last season. I keep harping on this point. I'm not going to excuse Real Madrid's poor La Liga season because, you know, they did it in the Champions League again, which they didn't even win the Champions League. But I'm not just going to dismiss that they were bad last season. Now, it's entirely possible, especially with the addition of Jude Bellingham, they're the best team in the league this season. But I'm still going to trust the team that showed up every week last season until I see something different. Oh, by the way, they added Ilkay Gundogan. And if you're going to put Real Madrid in that conversation, you have to put Atletico because they were right there in terms of final point total from last season. So there's a lot going on here. Carlo Ancelotti, all of the Barcelona stuff off the field, the new signings, Jude Bellingham. Does Mbappe end up at Real Madrid? It's seeming like that's not going to be the case. I'll talk about that in a minute. All of that, just what does the top of this league look like? Do we actually get this title race that on paper it looks like there should be, at least between Barcelona and Real Madrid? Then second is specifically the Champions League spots for me. Because you had a pretty clear delineation last season. As I mentioned, you had your top three teams, no surprise there. Then you had Real Sociedad, and then Villarreal and Real Betis were behind them. And you look at those teams now, Real Sociedad has swapped strikers. One Leipzig went in, one Leipzig went out. Villarreal, the players who are gone, this should not get overlooked. Nicholas Jackson, Pau Torres, Samuel Chukwueze, and I know he wasn't really there last season either, but Arnaud Danjuma. Can Villarreal, with those losses, improve to get to a Champions League spot? Can Betis improve to get to a Champions League spot? Can Sociedad replicate what they did last season when they were clearly the fourth best team in the league? That's what I'm curious about here, is kind of how does that second group behind the favorites play out? Do we get a more exciting race for fourth place? And then the other thing I want to mention real quickly that I'll be paying attention to is the relegation battle. And it's for this very specific reason. Almeria, Valencia, Getafe, Cadiz, and Celta Vigo all survived by 3 or fewer points last season. This was the relegation battle in Europe, at least in the top 5 leagues. I know that the Premier League had a really good one that went down to the final seconds of the season with multiple teams still in the mix there. But it wasn't anything like this, where just everybody was still in the thick of the relegation race for so long. So do we get a replication of that? None of these teams can go into the summer feeling good about this, considering how last season went. So do we have another, pretty clear bottom here where there are just a bunch of teams desperate to avoid relegation, or do a couple of these teams give themselves some breathing room and the relegation battle is not as interesting?